You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
I've always had this passion and belief that you can really drive growth in Africa through the private sector. Beyond Africa, we're also in Latin America, Colombia, El Salvador. We have an office in DC and London, and then also we're in Asia, India, Thailand as well. So yeah, strong presence in Africa, but then also spread across the globe. Scaling up the off-grid solutions is a way to tackle that deficit, given that grid connected power cannot serve everyone. We have the right culture to encourage ideas to come from every corner, and we really believe that the future of our firm will be shaped by the people that we have.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we find inspirational people who are doing inspirational things to unlock Africa's economic potential. Today, we have another special guest. We have Nneka Chime, who is a partner at CrossBoundary, which is a mission-driven investment firm that unlocks the power of capital for sustainable growth and strong returns in underserved markets. Welcome to the podcast, Nneka. How are you?
Hi, Tosa. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well. It's really great to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Fantastic. It's great to have you on the podcast. How's your day so far?
Yeah, so far so good. Yeah, I can't complain.
Brilliant. I know you've listened to the podcast before, and I usually like to start from the beginning. So I was hoping you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about Nneka.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, so I'm a partner at CrossBoundary Advisory. I'm based out of Lagos, Nigeria. Have been with the firm for 5 years now. Before CrossBoundary, I worked in investing on the continent, so in the healthcare space. So I've always had this passion and belief that you can really drive growth in Africa through the private sector. Understandably, there are a lot of challenges because, there's no such thing as a private sector that is decoupled from the public sector. And we're all, aware of the challenges we have across Africa, lots of fragile markets. The democracy is still, taking root, so to speak, in many of the markets there. So just always been passionate about accelerating the private sector as a way to drive hope and employment for the millions of youth that we have, and we are going to have even more of in the near future across Africa. So I got my MBA at Harvard. When I finished, I moved straight back to Nigeria to sort of pursue this idea of just facilitating investment. Did that in healthcare for a while and then joined CrossBoundary, and I've been here for over 5 years. And yes, so my role in CrossBoundary, so I'm a partner and the co-head of the Africa Advisory practice. And yeah, so what that means is I broadly look after all our engagement across Africa. I lead the teams jointly with a colleague who tends to focus a little bit more on the East African side of things. So worked with, a lot of different private sector clients, DFIs, governments as well. And, just really excited by the opportunity I see to keep doing what we're doing and keep bringing development through accelerating investment in the private sector space. Outside work, I have 2 kids, one on the way, probably will be out by the time this podcast is being released, hopefully.
So congratulations.
Thank you. So those are pretty much the highlights. And, I'm sure we'll dive into some of the topics as we go through this podcast.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So you've mentioned you're a partner at CrossBoundary. You've been there for 5 years and you have a passion for driving growth through the private sector. And you also lead the Africa team of CrossBoundary. So I was hoping we can go into your role in a bit more detail with regards to the elements in terms of how do you, through your role, contribute to unlocking the power of capital for sustainable growth in emerging markets such as Africa?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So my role is multidimensional. So I play a role in business development. So finding mission-aligned partners to work with. And what we're seeing is that a lot of different groups actually have the same interest. People want to see Africa develop. They want to see a thriving private sector that is, less dependent on aid and public assistance. So even amongst the donor community, seeing a lot of programs and interest in, just driving the private sector. But many parties don't really know exactly how. They know they want to do this and they have some tools at their disposal, but, the how is always a challenge. And then we also have the private sector, seeking return, seeking impact as well. We have the entrepreneurs as well that are seeking to grow companies. So lots of different groups. We have government as well looking to create that enabling environment, to reduce dependency on them and, just create a private sector that is thriving. So my role is to bring all of these different pieces together and help just these different parts of the ecosystem see the potential, sort of like a puzzle, like what role can they play and help them think through the how. So those are some of the client groups we work with, but there are others as well, like foundations as well. Often mission aligned, have capital to deploy, don't want to, deploy capital just as grants that would disappear. I think grants are important, but, some are looking for ways to also be catalytic. So that's something we're seeing, want to attract other partners and build sustainable blended finance models. So my role as a partner is, to sort of see how all these different pieces fit together, bring the right parties together and create structures that can work. And then I also have a role overseeing engagements that we have open, coaching the team, making sure that, we're delivering on the engagements that we have open, and then as well running the firm. Our culture is very important to us. So we see ourselves playing a role in reversing brain drain, for example. So we're also trying to create opportunities in these markets, create opportunities to retain talent in Africa, as opposed to having everyone that has the opportunity want to move out. So we're also creating quality jobs, a quality company with a great culture that is attracting talent to places like Nigeria, DRC, South Africa, Iraq, even Jordan. So our goal, we have an explicit, mission to retain talent in these underserved and frontier markets that we work in.
Brilliant. So you mentioned that your role is multidimensional and you work with a range of groups and partners across Africa and bring them together to achieve your joint missions across the continent. So which African markets are you currently active in?
Yeah, great question. And so we're active even beyond Africa. So we have over 20 offices across global financial centers and underserved markets. So we do have a strong presence in Africa, given, our focus on underserved markets. So in Africa, we have an office in Nigeria. Obviously, we have Ghana, we have Senegal, Mali, DRC, Uganda, Kenya, South Africa, just kicking off in Mozambique as well. And then we're also in Tunisia. And even beyond the places we have a physical office, we've also executed projects in markets where we don't have a physical office as well. So, if we look at the map, we've really covered most of Africa in a way that many firms have not. And yeah, beyond Africa, we're also in Latin America. We're in Colombia, El Salvador. We have an office in DC and London. And then also we're in Asia, in India, Thailand as well. So yeah, strong presence in Africa, but then also spread across the globe in global financial centers. So, we really believe in, focusing on the emerging and underserved markets, but we realize that there needs to be a link to those global financial centers as well, because we're trying to bridge that gap. So that kind of explains our strategy in terms of where we are physically located.
Thank you for that, Nneka. So you mentioned that you're active in Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Kenya, Mali. Is there a specific strategy that you use when deciding which African markets to have a presence in?
Sure. So I'll say in a way it's been sort of organic. So how it's worked is we tend to have an anchor project that takes us to a new country. So I would say there's probably a top-down and a bottom-up approach really that we take. So when we have an anchor project, that gives us an opportunity to learn first and to explore. So we use that to lay down roots, and where we see that there's an opportunity there, then, we're confident in terms of investing in that office, because we don't want to be a firm that just does individual projects and just kind of hops around and chases the opportunity. We really see ourselves making a meaningful commitment and engagement in the countries we're in. So I would say we've typically started with an anchor project and then use that as a tool for learning and then to see what the opportunity is. And then based on that, deepen our roots in the country. I mean, that has worked out for us so far. I mean, some markets are, of course, really challenging to sustain that level of business on an ongoing basis. So I'd say the strategy can be fluid, but so far it's worked out for us and we've really been able to become firmly rooted in those markets that we have established ourselves in.
You mentioned you have a meaningful approach that is quite fluid when deciding which markets to be active in. I think I read that CrossBoundary takes a transaction-centered approach to underserved markets. Could you explain what this approach involves and how it differs from, say, traditional investment models?
Yeah, so what we mean by that is that so our goal is to drive actual transactions, right? We want to say we've attracted X dollars to this country and this is the impact that we're having. So we don't want results that are a bit more ambiguous and difficult to quantify. So we tend to go with specific transactions. We work on specific deals, for example, with clear scope, a clear value add, clear results. So that's kind of what we mean by transaction-centered approach. So we deliver transaction advisory services both on the buy side. So we assist investors, mainly PE firms and DFIs, and increasingly more impact investors and family offices. And then we also have a sell side practice as well. So we assist capital seekers directly, or we help investors sell portfolio companies. So we have a concrete scopes of work that we do work on. Of course, we also do strategy work as well, increasingly. So, but strategy related to investment. So we've helped foundations or other parties, just shape their investment strategy. But the ultimate goal is to lead to transactions. So we're not just trying to produce nice reports. We're trying to have impact that drives transactions, because that is at the core of what we believe. We believe that more transactions, deeper capital markets, more deals, more capital flowing is, critical to driving our development in the markets that we work in.
Fantastic. So with that in mind, are you able to share any examples of, say, successful investment projects that CrossBoundary has been involved in recently in Africa?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I can give one example. So, I can't necessarily name names of clients, but, I'll just tell you about the deal. So we worked on a deal in the tech space recently for a VC investor. So they were looking to, make a commitment to a tech-enabled supply chain operator in, based in Nigeria, but expanding elsewhere. So they came to us to just validate their investment thesis to enable them to close the deal. So we did some work on that. So helping them to get down to the nitty-gritty. We did market surveys. We spoke to channel partners just to really understand and validate some of the assumptions behind their projections. And this deal also recently closed as well. You might have read about it, but don't want to
I understand.
violate our NDA. So that was one. We've also done a lot in the off-grid sector. So we've pioneered something we call the donor-supported investment facilitation model. So when we're working in particularly challenging or underserved markets, so places like Mali, we do the exact same work that we do on a private basis, but we get, but donor is willing to pay us because this donor is mission aligned, so they cover some or all of our fees. So we've done this in several different markets. We've done a lot in the off-grid space, for example. In Nigeria, for example, we've been able to work with over 90 off-grid companies and help them to raise capital for expansion. Yeah, so we've done over 90 deals in the off-grid space. Some were classic, just investment and fundraising deals, but some were also, market entry strategy or, investment strategy type opportunities as well.
Fantastic. It sounds like you're doing some great and much needed work. So with the example that you gave with the off-grid solutions, how do you believe those projects can contribute to, say, sustainable growth and strong returns in African markets?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the off-grid space, I think, everyone knows that energy and power is a big constraint to doing business anywhere in Africa, particularly in a place like Nigeria. So if you speak to many SMEs, regardless of what sector or, any industry really, even beyond just SMEs, power is always one of the biggest constraints because, it's never enough. It's not constant. It's not reliable. So it's a problem in healthcare, in manufacturing. It's a problem for, the small retailers. it's also a problem even for people just trying to go about their daily lives as well. So just scaling up the off-grid solutions is a way to tackle that deficit, given that grid connected power cannot serve everyone. So we've done studies looking at what is the best means of electrifying just based on different population characteristics, like how far are you from the existing grid lines? What will it cost to extend the grid? And so a lot of studies have been done on that. And what those showed is that there is really a big opportunity to leverage off-grid as a way to plug that deficit. So just helping some of these off-grid companies scale and helping the local companies kind of emerge and flourish more. So you will always have the big international players that have a stronger balance sheet coming into different countries, able to thrive, and they have different needs from the local off-grid companies that are also trying to grow. And so we work with both, and we've been able to achieve some successes there. So still think there's more to be achieved in future, but at least we're starting to see impact, and investor interest in that space has just really increased dramatically over the past 5 years. We've been engaged in that space in Nigeria.
Very interesting. You mentioned that energy and power is a big constraint and challenge in Africa. So with this in mind, what are some of the main challenges you face when working in African markets, and how do you work to overcome these challenges to achieve the ultimate goal in terms of your investment goal?
Yeah, sure. So, I think, first of all, we're realistic and we're used to working in emerging and frontier markets. Our managing partner who founded the firm, he worked in Afghanistan as a Marine. And then our firm has roots in, like South Sudan as well. One of our first advisory projects was in South Sudan. So first, we're just used to working in difficult markets. So the first thing is, we have a realistic view, so we don't panic every time there's like another coup in these environments. And I think everybody at the firm has this like sense of adventure. And obviously we secure our staff, and I don't want to give the impression that we're we're not safe. So but we have this kind of like realistic view, and we understand that challenges, are just part of the markets that we've chosen to work in. Yeah, so that's the first thing. So we try to really see beyond the challenges to see what is the opportunity. We know that a lot of other investors or advisors will over-index on the risk, and that really skews their perception. So there's a perception reality gap often when it comes to places like Africa. So we try to, unpack that to have a realistic view of what is the actual risk. And so I've been speaking a lot about advisory because, I'm a partner in the advisory business, but we also have direct investing platforms. So we also invest in these markets as well. We have an energy platform, which is a dedicated investment vehicle for commercial and industrial solar in Africa. We have a vehicle for rural mini-grid developers across Africa, a blended finance facility. We also have an investment vehicle to finance and develop educational infrastructure. And we're launching this year Fund for Nature, so a vehicle to finance high-integrity, nature-based carbon projects. We're also launching a strategic venture vehicle as well for global emerging markets. Yeah, so in addition to advisory, we also have a couple of investment platforms. So we're also reinvesting in the regions that we advise in, so literally putting our money where our mouth is as well. And I think, we just manage risk as they come, take a realistic view, try to unpack what is the actual risk, how does this affect the potential returns, and then there's also a little bit of courage that is required when
definitely.
To be honest, it requires courage to be out in places like the markets we work in. We're not we're all out there trying to achieve something great and highly impactful. But this is how we change lives.
Thank you for that. Earlier, you mentioned that CrossBoundary offers investment advisory services to clients such as governments, development finance institutions, and private equity firms. Is there a reason why you're focused on those specific type of clients?
Yeah, sure, because we're trying to drive capital to underserved markets, right? So we have to start by looking at who are the sources of capital. So investors, governments, foundations, donors, and then, a subset of those would be, mission aligned, like they also want the same things. So we have areas where we can potentially intersect. So we're basically following money, like who has money to that we're trying to attract to these markets. And then, of course, government is a key pillar as well. So in addition to being a funder, they're also, creating that enabling environment that is going to make sure that those funds can stick and achieve something that is really impactful. So that's kind of how we arrive at the groups that we focus on.
Fantastic. So once you've identified the groups or the type of clients, how does the team then go about working and providing specialized, expertise to unlock investment opportunities across African markets?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so some groups already know what they want and they just issue an RFP or contact you directly because they've worked with you in the past and you know what you're about and tell you, hey, we're trying to set up this like blended finance vehicle for XYZ. And yeah, so we get those sort of requests all the time. So some groups already kind of know what they want to do. But what I find really exciting is when we identify folks that they know they want to have an impact, but they don't really know exactly how. They know there's something, they have capital, they are interested in emerging markets or the markets we work in, and they're looking for a thought partner to just help them shape what this could look like. So we also have groups like that, and you can meet them. There's no sort of playbook on where to find these guys. Just being in the space, and once you build your reputation to the extent we have, we tend to also cross paths with them. So that's another way of developing client relationships as well, I would say. And the firm is also very entrepreneurial. So also rely on ideas, not just from the partners, but really from everyone. So we have the right culture to encourage ideas to come from every corner. And we really believe that the future of our firm will be shaped by the people that we have.
So if we move from clients to the countries that you have a presence in, CrossBoundary has a strong presence in Nigeria. We know that during 2023, Nigerian economy has faced a range of challenges from the Naira redesign to change of government. Has this had any impact on the work that you're doing?
I would say it has in a way, but we try not to over-index on the bad news. We understand how it can cause challenges, but we also try to see the opportunity. Basically for every challenge, there's an opportunity that is unlocked, right? So we try to see what is that opportunity. So for example, because things have been challenging, inflation, we're seeing a very resilient private sector, lots of youth that they can't get regular employment. They need a place to channel their creativity, and they're going into a lot of startups. So we've seen that a lot of activity. And so we're working with them in raising and with the global investor community to keep seeing the opportunities there despite the challenges that exist. So So I'd say that that's one way. And then also, convincing some of the other partners we work with that now is the time to support this private sector because they can't really rely as much as they used to on the public sector, just given how, purses are tightening and it's just challenging. So I would say there's some counter-cyclicality, and then, every challenge creates an opportunity as well. So while, yes, have we been affected? We probably can't quantify all the ways we've been affected because a lot of companies are not doing well. And at the end of the day, we also want to serve companies. So it makes it more challenging to find certain types of clients in an overall depressed environment. But then there are also opportunities that we've been able to capitalize on.
Thank you for that. I guess your investment is about overcoming challenges and making a positive impact in underserved markets. So I was hoping we could go into a bit more detail regarding that in terms of what positive impact do you feel the unlocking of investment opportunities provides to, say, regions and economies such as Nigeria?
Mm-hmm. I mean, at the end of the day, people everywhere, whether it's Nigeria or, Finland or the US, people, everyone wants the same thing. Everyone wants to live a good life, to be able to provide for their families, to enjoy time with loved ones. So it actually really just comes down to this human element. And how do we create this? If we have stable and prosperous societies where people can, achieve their potential, live healthy lives, have meaningful jobs, and access to all those basic things that allows them to just, live a full life, So that's really the ultimate end goal if you think about it. And what we're doing is we're trying to create these prosperous and sustainable growing societies in the countries that we work in. So when the private sector is thriving, there are jobs created, and it's something that we track as well. So when we work on deals, we also want to track like how many jobs are created, how many were for women. So it's something that's, some of the partners we work with also care about. So how did this impact the lives of youth? So it goes down to these human metrics. It's also about the dollars we bring in, but also realizing that these dollars translate into people's ability to, live a good life and enjoy the things that everyone really wants to enjoy out of life.
Thank you for that. You mentioned that the end goal is creating stable, prosperous economies that enable people to have healthy and full lives. So in what ways does CrossBoundary align its investments with, say, sustainable development goals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's pretty aligned. So if you look at our investment platforms, for example, we're doing a lot in energy, which is a key one. And the thing about energy is that it's cross-cutting, right? Because it enables other industries like health, which are also part of the SDGs, education. So we're doing this through infrastructure. But that also enables education broadly. And then recently launching the Fund for Nature. So climate is also a big one that we're also trying to tackle. There's right now, we're at a place in the world globally where we're trying to determine how to best address climate change. How do you price the services that nature provide to us, which has been undervalued. So the Fund for Nature is going to be highly impactful. In doing that, it's a dedicated investment vehicle to finance nature-based carbon projects. So looking at that climate and environment side of things. So I'll say most things we do are really aligned to the SDGs. Even in our advisory work as well, we tend to also focus on these sectors. And the partners we work with are also very keen on this sector. So we have a healthcare advisory team, for example, doing a lot in health through transactions. So working with these companies that are driving impact, enabling them to attract capital and expand and grow and have more direct impact.
Fantastic. So you mentioned the fund is highly impactful, focusing on areas such as climate and health. So how do you go about measuring the impact of your investment in these areas?
Okay, so I'll speak from the advisory side. So how we measure the impact of kind of the transactions that we facilitate. So we have different ways depending on what the specific transaction or engagement is. So there are certain key things we'll always want to track. The first is just how much did we mobilize, how much was the capital we were able to mobilize, and then also things like jobs that were created, impact on women, impact on youth. Sometimes we'll go into things like CO2 emissions avoided. So we have different metrics that we track just to assess the impact of the work we're doing. So I'd say the headline one is, capital mobilized, because we believe that is the, kind of like the feeder driver of other areas of impact, but then we also do track other things as well.
So I was wondering, does the way you measure impact vary from market to market?
I would say it varies from project to project, so it depends on the deal. So if it's a clean energy deal, for example, we'll be more concerned about CO2, emissions avoided. If it's like something where you're trying to displace imports, we'll be concerned about how much imports were displaced. Versus if it's a healthcare deal where you want to track patient access, for example. So I'll say it varies deal by deal or transaction by transaction, but there are some things that are cross-cutting, like capital mobilized and an impact on women and youth and things like that are a bit more cross-cutting, but we're able to also kind of customize indicators. And sometimes if we're working on behalf of a specific client, they also might have something that they care deeply about, and we're able to work with them to kind of tailor the impact measurements to suit that.
Okay. So we've talked about the impact of investments that you advise on. So before advising on these investment opportunities, what factors do you look at to evaluate these opportunities?
Sure. So there are several factors we look at. So first, we want to have a balance between kind of large deals where you can drive a lot of impact with one transaction and smaller deals that, really need our help. Because sometimes the smaller deals will really need, more help to close because, they're small. So the lift is a bit higher. So we want to have a balance because we want those large deals because those large deals, obviously drive more capital, more impact. But then we also want the small deals to graduate to a point where they're at that scale. So that's one thing we try to balance. And then obviously we want to screen out anything unethical or not aligned with our mission. So there are certain things that, we wouldn't want to really touch because it's just not aligned with our mission. We also look at how catalytic is this transaction going to be. So ideally, by working on a transaction, we're catalyzing additional impact down the line. So whether it's a deal that can scale beyond this one opportunity or one that it opens up a new market to others and therefore the impact is multiplied. So these are some things that we kind of look at in order to select deals to work on. So we have a methodology around just kind of seeing what makes sense to pursue.
At the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned that you've been at CrossBoundary for the last 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, how has this space evolved during the last 6 years?
Yeah, definitely. So just over 5 years now. So I've been really impressed, surprised by the interest from different groups in what we're doing. So, a lot of different groups, whether it's DFIs or foundations. I think there's a reawakening towards the potential impact of blended finance. We need more blended finance. And we're really pioneers here. We have the experience in bringing different parties together and structuring opportunities where everyone is able to get what they need and contribute what they can. So we've seen that the interest in that has just really grown. So I think it's people becoming cognizant of the fact that, no one group can really solve all the global challenges we face because we have a lot of multi-dimensional challenges as a world, dealing with a lot of critical issues at the same time that just really requires different parties to work together. And we're seeing these different parties sort of realize that. So, we're seeing rise of ESG investing, for example. We're seeing donors starting to be more private sector oriented, whereas before it wasn't always that way. So they're trying to think of, how can I mobilize the private sector? For example, USA just recently launched the ATI program where it's really around, just driving the private sector, working with the private sector to achieve results. So it's the largest such program ever launched by USAID, for example. And this has happened in the past 2 years. So we're just seeing that different folks are just realizing the impact you have can be multiplied when you work together. So it's so exciting to be at the center of all of that. So I think we can have, 10x the impact that we're having today in the next, just looking at 5 years, going forward 5 years from now. So I think the opportunities are limitless. And I'm excited to start to see some, success stories come to the forefront and just seeing the interest and commitment multiply.
Fantastic. So you mentioned looking to the future, it looks optimistic. So where do you see the space in terms of blended finance evolving in Africa in the next 5 years?
Interesting question. So yes, I think that there will be more because, just something that we need. And hopefully we do a good job at convincing all the stakeholders that are not already convinced on how critical it is to just all bring all parties together because, one party won't be able to meet the needs of our generation. So, we have threats to, life as we know it, from climate change, healthcare, access to healthcare. All of these are underfunded. We can't depend on any one party to solve it. So we really need the creativity of the private sector. We need the commitment of government. We need funding from DFIs and donors. So I think that these challenges are not going anywhere. I don't think climate change is just going to disappear. It's only going to be more real. We've already seen, for example, last year in Nigeria, significant flooding across 20 states. So out here in the West, we're seeing, increasing wildfires in California, same thing happening in some parts of Australia. So we're seeing coastal erosion, places like Lagos currently under threat from, the sea. So a lot of different challenges are only going to accelerate. So it's either we have to be proactive as a society and just realize that we have to work together and this involves blended finance, or we'll be forced to. So I'm hoping that we take the proactive route. Also, a lot of the last remaining carbon sinks we have are in Africa. So, the Congo Basin, for example, And if we don't all rally together to protect these environments for the good of the world at large, then, it's going to become a situation where we are forced to, right? So I think that as we become increasingly cognizant of this, we're going to see more commitment and more interest in blended finance as a way to kind of unlock these opportunities and protect ourselves from these global threats that affect all of us. So there's a threat that binds all of us together, whether you're in Africa or in Asia or in the US. So we need everyone to play their part.
I agree 100%. So with that in mind, where do you see CrossBoundary, say, in 5 years' time?
Okay, so 5 years ago when I joined CrossBoundary, we were about 40 people, and now we're 200 people.
Oh, wow.
We've grown in that time. 40% are women, by the way, so also very gender inclusive. So looking 5 years from now, I'm hoping that, we'll continue this pace of growth. So from 40 to 200 in the past 5 years, maybe we'll be at, 500 in 5 years from now. We'll be deeper in the markets that we're working in, working on larger, more impactful projects, working with more stakeholders. Also be deeper in some of the established financial centers of the world and just bring the work we're doing to more of the mainstream. So right now we will always remain focused on having impact in underserved and emerging markets. But I think this is also a globally relevant set of activities, because we need to elevate these regions that we're working in for the sake of the world. So I don't think it's something that should remain solely in this sphere, this cool activities happening in Africa. It's like, yes, we're doing work in Africa and emerging Asia and Latin America, but it is globally relevant. So hoping that we will bring some of this to the mainstream, work with more providers of capital, bring more interest to the type of work we're doing, serve more clients, deepen, create more quality jobs that reverse the brain drain and attract and house talent in these markets that we are operating in. So that's what I hope, and I guess I see for the next 5 years for CrossBoundary.
Fantastic. I'm sure you'll achieve it after hearing the exponential growth you've had over the last 5 years. Fantastic.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, proverbs, or affirmations that keep us going when times are challenging or when times are good. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
Well, one proverb I like, I don't know if it's something that keeps me going, but I keep coming back to it, is when two elephants fight, it's the grass that gets trampled.
Yes, I like that one.
I think it probably comes from some African literature book I probably read in high school or something. But anyway, something I think about a lot, especially as we are in this global tussle for dominance between, the West, China, Russia. Africa is a stomping ground. Everyone is fighting. So it's like there are all these elephants and Africa is the grass and we're getting trampled because everyone is thinking of their interests. So it's something that I think about. And I think about, is there a model where these parties that are very different, have very different models, very different aims, can align and maybe work together. It might be a bit of a stretch, but when it comes to Africa, at least, is there a model that, Africa doesn't become the grass that gets trampled in this global tussle? So we need folks that are African, but also globally plugged in to also consider the viewpoint of what is best for Africa and, just play in that global stage that helps to structure deals and activities that also consider, the grass that is unfortunately getting trampled and not just, align with one elephant, because that isn't necessarily the way forward. So that's something that I keep coming back to and thinking about.
Thank you for sharing that. I like that proverb because it's very vivid and appropriate with regards to what's currently happening on the continent regarding global trade dynamics. So thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. As we're coming to the end of today's conversation, I was wondering if you had any closing remarks, final calls to action for people who are listening, who are interested in blended finance, the work that you do at CrossBoundary.
Just inviting people that are curious to, check us out, get in touch. We're always happy to think about how to have more impact, be thought partners. We've worked with many groups now, and we're always open to ideas. So yeah, just invite folks to get in touch. Capital providers, very welcome to reach out if folks have ideas, or, even if they don't know the how, because we're also skilled at helping people think through the how, but they know that we want to have an impact. We have X amount. Yeah. And then also folks should also realize that it's not always a trade-off, right? I mean, sometimes it is a trade-off between impact and returns, but, the reality is that there are also a lot of good businesses in emerging markets. And at the end of the day, market failure is also what creates opportunities for outsized returns. And we've gotten this expertise at, just really unpacking risk versus risk perception. So always, keen to hear from, capital providers, DFIs, and just, increase the visibility of the work that we are doing. So that'll be my closing message. Like, emerging markets matter. They probably matter more than most people think. And they're going to affect everyone's lives, no matter where they are. Like what happens in Nigeria and Sudan and Thailand, like it matters to people that are living in London. They may not know it, but, it's worth it to be proactive.
Brilliant. That is a great way to close today's conversation. Thank you for joining me today, Nneka. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out to join us during your leave. So it's been a great conversation, and look forward to catching up whenever you return.
Thanks, Tersa. This was great. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you. And we will speak soon.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you, and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.